Hello, my name is Yurii. We're at UATV, and we had a chance to talk to someone who fought for freedom and sovereignty in most literal sense. I give you Paul Smith, aka Yurii, the United States and Ukrainian armies veteran. In the end of his interview, Paul seized the opportunity and addressed his fellow Americans. First of all, Paul, thank you so very much for this opportunity to talk to someone who really believes that the freedom is a core human value. Tell us a bit more about yourself. Why you're in Ukraine? Who? Paul Smith. Tell us about the person.
So I've met my first Ukrainian friends in 2007.
Wow.
They were traveling to America on a work and travel program through the University of Kiev.
Right.
And they invited me to come to Ukraine. So in 2008, I came to Ukraine for the first time and fell in love with the country, like the people, the culture.
Tell me about it.
So yeah,
Right.
I loved my time here. One of my friends took me to Lvov, and I fell in love with the city. So I decided there I would find a way to move to Ukraine. Also around the same time, so I decided I would move to Lviv. So I moved to Lviv, that I would move to Lviv. Shortly after I had actually joined the US Army, I served 4 years in the Army from 2008 to 2012. And
Right.
when I got out of the Army, I moved to Lviv and planning to try to do some business or something
Okay.
there. Ended up having to go back to the States a week before Maidan happened.
Right.
Because my visa was expired. Went back to the States to get a new visa, and then at that time, all of this happened. My friends, I had a way of shipping stuff in and out of Ukraine, so my friends were asking me for military equipment,
Right.
and I was able to ship armor and other things into Ukraine during the Russia trying to take over the Donbass region after they took over Crimea. So I was supporting my friends in 2014, came back here in 2015. I trained some guys. I went to Mariupol. We went to a village near the front. I saw how things were there. I continued my passion for Ukraine and sending Ukraine military equipment. And in 2020, 2016 when I was here, I met with some people that were developing some drone stuff.
Right. Right.
Because at the time there wasn't any lethal aid coming from the United States. Poland was giving aid, and some European countries were giving some aid.
Right.
But it wasn't what Ukraine needed.
No,
so
not even close. Right.
that's how they started to innovate on different things with drones and equipment. I was working on a turret project with some guys where it was basically a remote control turret that would sit on top of the trench
Right.
and attack the Russians. So I was working on that. I have a mechanical background, an engineering background. I started my manufacturing company when I returned back to the United States in 2016. And in 2020, when COVID happened, China had shut down, and my company became very popular in manufacturing. So it expanded really quickly, and I was actually planning on, at the end of 2022, this was planned in 2020, at the end of 2022, I was going to move my factory to Ukraine because it would have been easier and cheaper to manufacture and prototype a lot of the equipment that I was working on at the time here.
Right.
And then Putin invaded. I was going to do one last big job in America. I had some contracts lined up for the beginning of 2022. And I was going to finish those out, pack my machines in the fall, and then send them to Ukraine. So by spring 23,
Right.
they would arrive in Ukraine. But those plans changed when Putin invaded. So I stopped all the contracts. I put all my machines into a storage state, and then I came out here to Ukraine and I fought for 18 months.
Why? Well, I mean, I know why. But we heard voices, you know, and especially in America, that people just don't know about the war. Yeah, the war in Ukraine, but the Russia and Ukraine, they're more or less the same. They've been asking the questions like that, but you know they're not.
Well, I was actually until my first trip to Ukraine in 2008, I was actually under the same impression.
Right.
So I was actually really pro-Russian, really pro-Putin. And part of the reason I accepted the invitation to come to Ukraine was because I knew Ukraine was right next to Russia, and then I could use that as a
There we go.
springboard to go to Russia. And I wanted to
Right.
go see Moscow and St. Petersburg and all these other cities. Like I wanted to spend time in Stalingrad. I wanted to go to.
Right.
I wanted to tour. I wanted to tour all these places in Russia that like I read about, or I watched movies about, or I understood, and when I came to Ukraine, I was like, oh, this is so good. And when I went to Lviv, I met some people, and I was talking to one of them, and he was like telling me, like everything that I thought about Russia was actually, you know, wrong. It was very curated persona that Putin wanted
Right.
to put out there, because he had worked in Russia. He was when the FSB was switching over from the KGB in the 90s, he was working with them. And he saw like how things changed from the 80s. He saw what happened through the 90s, and then at the beginning of Putin's
Fallen into dictatorship.
yeah. So he watched
Slide in.
he watched how Russia's trajectory changed from the 90s into the early 2000s when Putin took power.
Right.
And he was like, he knew information about stuff with Putin that Putin didn't want to put out there. Like he knew who Putin was. So this was before Russia's invasion of Georgia, when I was in Ukraine in 2008. And he was telling me about it because he was seeing things going on in Georgia with, you know, Georgia wanting to be part of NATO, NATO troops going there to assist Georgia, and how Putin would use this particular playbook with Russian speakers
Right.
being
Right.
oppressed, and
Sure.
you know,
Just a pretext.
yeah, the pretext. So he said that this is what was going on, and I was like, I wasn't believing him. I was like, you know, I had conspiracy.
Well, it wasn't easy to believe things like that. You
Yeah,
have
yeah,
your
it
own
was-
stance already, so you'll have to somehow shift to move from that. It's not an easy
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah, so it wasn't until 2010 until I started really forming the person I am now. But like at first I was like, okay, I have conspiracy theorist friends in the States.
Right.
I'm really big into firearms manufacturing in the US. So I have those fringe people who think one day that bullets would be a currency because the world collapses, and you know, that's their belief. And I was like, okay, you know, first off, we're far from that part of the world, that point in the world. So
Now, you're here. Now, being the person you are now, I can understand what knucking futs mean, but knucking futs Yurii. Why Yurii?
So the Nuck and Futs actually was, I had a morale patch when I was in Korea made up, and I kind of thought the phrase was funny, so I just put that on a morale patch. And then while I was fighting in Ukraine, I had my morale patch on my shoulder, and then a lot of people just identified it from my viral video. And so I took that as kind of like a marketing thing for myself.
Okay.
But Yurii actually comes from the Nicolas Cage movie Lord of War.
Right.
So, like I said, I was sending military equipment into Ukraine as far back as the last half of 2010 was when I first started putting equipment here.
Okay.
So uniforms, pouches, armor, different equipment that, you know, an individual soldier would need to fight the war.
Right.
And then when I came to Ukraine, at that time, Putin had threatened that any foreigner caught would be treated as a mercenary and killed. So I had the opportunity to join a whole bunch of different units in Ukraine that my friends were a part of. And they're like, oh, come here, we can do this with this unit. And I was telling them I need like a contract, I need like the green book.
Right.
And they're like, oh, we can't do that because there was no mechanism within their unit to take in a foreigner at that time. So I went ahead and joined the International Legion because that was the only opportunity that would give me a contract with the Green Book. And then I thought, okay, I'll just sign the contract and then they'll transfer over to one of my friends' units. And while I was in the Legion, like everybody was coming into the Legion, a lot of former American soldiers or former Western soldiers
Right.
would just assume that they come here and they get all the kit, all the equipment that they need and they go to the front. And then when they came here and then realized that, like, here's body armor, here's a helmet, here's a gun, they're like, oh, we need a magazine pouch, we need grenade pouches, we need medical pouches, we need rucksacks.
All sorts of things, right?
Yeah. I already had all that stuff pre-positioned here. I started, like, the day I actually got the nickname, I had gone to my team. It was the second team I was a part of in the Legion. And I told them, like, everybody was all complaining because we were about to go to Mykolaiv. Nobody had anything. I was like, give me a list of what you guys need. Like,
Right.
everything that you guys need, everything that you guys want, and then everything you guys would like to have.
Right, guardian angel.
And I started going through the list, and a lot of the need stuff, like pouches and stuff like that, that was easy to get. We needed tons of extra magazines, especially NATO-style magazines, like the Stenag AR-style mags. So I was able to get a ton of those. I was able to get a ton of pouches. And then the medical stuff, the medics actually really needed a lot
What
of
a treasure.
supplies. Yeah.
What a treasure that time.
So I actually had contacts with some medical individuals, and I was able to get literally everything that the medics needed,
Right.
except for like a couple things. And when the boxes came, we were in Mykolaiv at the time. We picked up the boxes from Nova Post. There was like 3 large boxes, and I opened them up. Like, the first box had nothing but medical supplies. I gave that to the medic. Second box had a lot of pouches and stuff, and third box had some of stuff for me, and then other stuff for the other guys.
Right.
And when I opened the box, one of the guys said, "You're like the Lord of War." And then, like,
Here we
everybody
go.
kind of laughed, and then they're like, "Yeah, you're like Yurii from the Lord of War." And then that's actually how the nickname Yurii came about.
Great. I mean, it suits you all right.
Yeah.
Right. Paul, let's slide to what happened recently with all these. I've got plenty of questions. We could talk for hours.
Yeah.
I know, you're not too tight on the schedule, but I'm not want to be, too pushy. But the one thing bothers me with these Russian drones easily crossing borders of all countries. Like just yesterday, it was Denmark. Recently, it was Poland.
You have MiGs in Estonia.
Estonia. Well, I came from Latvia, born and raised in Latvia myself. I know exactly. We don't want to be a part of the Soviet Union anymore. That's what Russia is, obviously.
Yeah.
So, but it looks like Putin is absolutely sure that he can do whatever he wants. He's actually doing it. Do you believe that Europe is even somewhat ready to deter Russia at the moment?
No, they're not ready to deter Russia because they keep putting in red lines, or they keep telling stop doing this. But Putin's like a child trying to see as much as he can get away with unattentive parents. So it's literally it's how I look at it, right? So Putin's going, pushing the boundary here, sending, oh, my mistake, I didn't mean to send a drone over there. And then he's just gauging how Europe is reacting to his
Attempts,
provocations.
Right.
And he's getting more bolder.
Obviously.
He's using hybrid attacks against Poland and the Baltic states, Germany. He's using, just straight up sending in a drone or something. And because it's a drone and it didn't cause any damage, they're like, okay, it's no big deal. It's nothing to like get all worked up about. But, like, Russia understands that he can't fight and win against NATO because we're using NATO equipment in here in Ukraine, and a lot of the Ukrainian soldiers that I trained did not receive what level of training you would receive if you were in a NATO country regarding a lot of this equipment. A lot of them have gotten really good at using the equipment under combat conditions.
Obviously, I mean, necessity breeds innovation, isn't
Yes.
it? I mean, you just don't have much of a choice.
Yes, but like the way artillery systems, communication systems,
Right.
reconnaissance systems, air systems,
Great.
maneuvering systems, and maneuvering units in like America would work together in order to attack a Russian position. You know, Ukraine is still working on that. Ukraine's still figuring that out. Ukraine's being extremely cautious with the assets that they have because they have very limited assets.
Right.
So I understand that part, but like if Russia pushed hard enough and actually got a proper NATO response, that NATO unit would absolutely wipe the floor with Russia. There'd be no way Russia would be able to defend against an actual directed might of NATO.
Right. That's sad. That's sad. Why this is not happening, you think? Is it a fear?
I think he is pushing as far as he can to really prevent
An actual
NATO,
escalation?
well, prevent the escalation, but prevent NATO from reacting, but then at the same time putting it in the back of the heads that NATO needs to watch out for their own. So instead of sending more Patriot systems to Ukraine, maybe they should keep some Patriot systems in Poland and Germany in order to defend that sky, because those Patriot systems are just going to sit there.
Right, well, that's scattering of resources, isn't it?
Yeah, so he is trying to throttle down what's being sent into Ukraine to go against Russia, because everything that's coming into Ukraine is going against Russia.
Right.
So they don't want, you know, it was like the thing with the artillery shells. The artillery shells, United States had worked through its stockpile of munitions that they could send out. They had to keep a certain level of munitions, you know, in case of China and Taiwan or other conflicts. So, you know, if China wasn't, you know, doing their, just saying, you know, hey, we're going to invade Taiwan, we're doing all these drills next to Taiwan, we're doing all this stuff in the South China Sea, I think U.S. would be like more willing to be like, oh, we can send a lot more shells, we can dip deeper into our reserves to send this stuff. So it's kind of this way that Russia is, you know, stoking fears within NATO, that, hey, we might attack you, so NATO doesn't send as much aid as they need, as Ukraine would need.
Do you believe that the current American administration has a plan? Donald Trump and everyone has a plan to sort things out with Russia?
No.
Why?
It doesn't seem... I supported Trump in 2016. I did not support him in 2020.
What changed?
January.
Okay.
So I did support him in 2020 to an extent, but definitely after January 6th,
right.
I no longer had support for Trump. So one thing that Trump did do that I was appreciative of was in 2017 sent javelins and stingers to Ukraine. I even remember the announcement because I went ahead.
That was big, right.
Yeah. I went ahead on, there's a government surplus site called GovPlanet, and they have these chargers for the same kind of batteries that the CLU, the computer targeting unit of the Javelin would have.
Right.
And I had bought up a whole bunch of these chargers and a whole bunch of these chargeable batteries, so I sent them to my Ukrainian friends that were receiving Javelins so that they could train on the Javelin CLU, the computer itself.
Right.
So there's the missile, and then there's this targeting computer. And you can use that targeting computer to an extent to kind of just play around and familiarize yourself with it. But those batteries that you generally have that get sent with them, they're non-rechargeable, and you know they don't really last long in a training thing. So I sent them a whole bunch of these batteries and a whole bunch of these battery chargers, and you know, I was appreciative that people in the first Trump administration were able to say, hey, this was, you know, this was a good thing to support Ukraine. And then after part of the reason I stopped also supporting him was with the whole 2020 election with the stopping aid to Ukraine in order to get an investigation against Hunter Biden, which,
Right.
I mean, like I'm not a huge fan of Obama, I'm not a huge fan of Biden, but just to do that to Ukraine in order to strong arm Ukraine into doing what Trump wants, like, I'm not appreciative of that.
So where are we going now with this administration? I mean,
If he wanted to stop the war, because he kind of does have the power to stop the war. If he cuts
that's
aid
what
off,
I'm talking about.
yeah,
Exactly. He definitely has the power.
he has the power, but it's not in the way that a lot of Americans think. A lot of Americans think, well, if we stop aid to Ukraine, Ukraine will stop the war with Russia, or Ukraine will collapse. Ukraine won't ever collapse. Russia could probably take more territory in the east, but they would not be able to take all of Ukraine. They wouldn't be able to take Kiev. They wouldn't be able to do anything. But there would be
more
bloodshed, but there would be a terror campaign Russia would launch into Ukraine, basically as punishing it for standing up against Russia. If Trump cut U.S. aid, and he can only cut U.S. aid and U.S.-based weapon systems to Ukraine, he can kind of influence some parts of Europe, especially the far western parts of Europe. But countries like Poland, the Baltic states will always support Ukraine, 100%, because, they're the next target. Ukraine itself is developing a very robust manufacturing, but the one thing that U.S. has that Russia doesn't have, China doesn't have, all the other countries doesn't have, are extremely precise long-range weapon systems. If Trump wanted to stop this war, he would authorize the use of these long-range systems against, they could even say, hey, these are the specific targets we want to hit, and then use these long-range systems. Then you wouldn't have these small drones going into oil refineries to take out oil refineries. If we could put a Taurus or a Storm Shadow onto the factory that is producing the cruise missiles that Russia launches against us. If they're able to use longer range fires against the drone factories producing the Shaheeds. And it's not even just the large factories themselves. There's a lot of smaller companies producing smaller components needed for the Shaheeds. Like, I'm a manufacturer, and although I did manufacture parts for larger projects, I was only a small part, right? But if I stopped producing this small part, that factory would need to relocate would need to find another factory to build that small part. That delays time.
I know this is a system.
Production.
I know, of course, I understand. But my question is, why is that not happening? Why America being definitely able to is not stopping this war? Maybe this is good for everyone.
Yeah,
but Ukraine.
Russian propaganda really got into the right of American politics, and Trump would largely follow. Like, although he directs his base where to go because of who he is, if the right was more vocal about supporting Ukraine, it is literally what a lot of the two-way people that, I'm friends with or was friends with, this was their dream. Their country is being attacked by a foreign aggressor, and they get to go out and use their rifles to defend their homeland. This is literally the patriots' dream right here in Ukraine. But they weren't vocal enough to Trump's base, which then shifted that narrative towards what Russia wanted the narrative to be. If it was the opposite, like if it was flipped and, the right was extremely militarily supportive of Ukraine, this war would have been over. I would have been here for the 18 months I was fighting on the front. We would have been pushing back to the Azov Sea.
Well, amen to that. Maybe that will flip one day. But having what we have. It is what it is. Talking about the military of Ukraine, Ukrainian army, Ukrainian defense forces. If you, Mr. Paul Smith, will be in charge of it, you are the commander-in-chief of all Ukrainian army, what would you do now?
Focus more on taking out Russia's economic lifeline, because as long as Russia is able to afford the war, they're going to continue to prosecute the war.
That is oil production?
Oil production is basically, like they say, Russia's a gas station.
Right, it is.
The oil production. It already shows in Russia, you know, the effects Ukrainian attacks on refinery pumping stations is having.
Definitely.
I kind of go into a real quick side story. One of my friends was born in Russia, moved to Ukraine when he was young.
Right.
Married Ukrainian, has a family. After Crimea was taken by Russia, his parents left for Russia. And his parents, and I remember these people because I was at their house. They fed me. I spent nights at their house when I was getting set up here in Ukraine.
Right.
And they're a lovely couple, but after Russia took Crimea, they went to Russia, and they told him to move his family to Russia because things in Ukraine was going to get bad. And all the way up into the actual 2022, so when I say the invasion, I mean the whole army invasion, not just back from 2014. But the invasion in 2022, I was actually in Ukraine with my friend while he was talking to his parents. He's talking to them in Russian, and I hear him, you know, and then he hangs up the phone, and he's talking to me, and like Russia had just, at that time, had bombed in Mariupol, the kids that were underground, the opera house. They had bombed that, and he was saying this, and they're like, no, that's not true. Russia is only attacking military targets, military targets. Civilians are safe, but they still wanted the family to like flee and come into Russia because, you know, Russia was going to, you know, take over Ukraine, even despite the fact that he's all the way in Lviv. And like a year or so ago, I was talking with him, and he's telling me, I was like asking how his parents are, like, you know, how are your parents? And he's like, once a month he's talking to them, and they're complaining about they can't get this in the store anymore. This is so much more expensive. They can't buy as much of this as they used to. They can only buy X amount because of the issues that they're having.
I wonder why is that?
Yeah, they can't buy stuff out of the country. They used to import a lot of stuff out from like Europe and stuff. They would order it and it would be delivered to their house. They can only buy stuff from like Chinese manufacturers that's not as good. So they're constantly complaining about the state of Russia, but then everything is still okay. In their mind, is still okay in Russia. So unfortunately, until that mindset is extremely deep, especially with the older generation people.
Right, that's true.
Until Ukraine can cut off Russia's ability to fund this war, it's going to be difficult for Ukraine. So I would go after the economic targets that Russia's using to fund the war. I would go after the targets that Russia's using, the factories producing the weapons, the factories producing the components. So Ukraine's already doing this to an extent. Developing more in a lot of Ukraine's long-range precision fires to affect this. The Operation Spiderweb, which even caught me off guard, was an amazing attack against Russia's capabilities to, you know, attack Ukraine.
Recent counteroffensive in Sumy. It's like more than 60 square miles or something.
Yeah.
Getting back, which is Russia literally controls now less territory than it had like almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So, all right, it was a pleasure. Now, can I ask you to address your fellow Americans and try to make them understand why you're here, what are you doing, and try to change their minds if they are even somewhat pro-Russian. Would you do that for me?
Yeah. So to my fellow Americans who don't want to believe that Russia is the actual aggressor in this war. This is the defense of democracy that Ukraine is putting up against actual tyranny. If you look at what Ukraine has survived these last 3.5 years fighting Russia, it's clear to me because I've lived here for so long, I've traveled to Ukraine so long, I've gotten to know the people so much. But look at how Russia makes it illegal to protest the war, to even call this a war. Look how Russia bans media and reporters unless they are very pro-Kremlin reporters. It's an assault against freedom and democracy. The freedom of the people to determine how they want to live their lives and not be told by a foreign government, an overreaching government saying, no, you can't do this because it does not fit what he, Putin, envisions for himself. I got to come here and stand shoulder to shoulder with not only Ukrainians, but also fellow Americans. Everybody that I have personally met and fought with have all identified as right-leaning Republican individuals like myself. The two things that I appreciate most in this world is freedom and your right to determine how you want to be able to live. And I got to come here and help defend not just Ukraine's freedom, not just Europe's freedom, but eventually this war would have transpired, would have come to America in one fashion or another. A lot of people say, oh, we need to secure our borders before we can worry about other countries' borders. If you've not seen the video footage of migrants coming through the Polish border and the Polish security forces stopping that, those migrants are being shuttled through Russia from the Middle East and Asia through Belarus to the border. How do you think once Putin achieves his goals in Europe, if America is still standing against Russia, that same hybrid warfare Russia uses against Europe, he will use against America, or China will use against America. So if we don't stop it here, then it will be on our soil. It will be our people having to pay a higher price for the freedom that you are enjoying right now.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.